So my intention for the day is to share with you the tools to motivate, engage, and inspire your team through successful meetings. This session is for you, whether you find your meetings ineffective or miserable or too many, or if you love your meetings and you're here to get some inspiration of how to make them even better. Let's get a feeling in the room. How much do you enjoy your meetings from 1 to 10? And 1 being you would prefer to have a root canal rather than attend some of your meetings. And 10 being meetings is the favorite part of your week. You're really looking forward to them. You don't want them to end. And I'm talking on average. So I'd love you to type on the chat and get a feeling in the room and actually see how other founders are doing. Let's be honest here. On average, how much do you enjoy your meetings? Let me read this. 4497884784676 So we have a lot of variety, a lot of 8s, a lot of 4s too. So we have a 9 as well. Perfect. The intention is hopefully with what I'll share today and with the discussions we're going to have, we're going to improve that score. So here's what I'll share in the presentation, and then I'm happy to answer questions and take the discussion wherever you feel is most useful. I want to share the most common mistake that leads to ineffective meetings, the #1 priority to focus on for successful meetings, and the 4 questions to answer at the beginning of your meeting. Feel free to type questions as well as we go along, and we'll have time for Q&A in the end as well. Before I dive into that agenda, I wanted to share how come I wrote a book about meetings. And the truth is, even 2 years ago, if someone had told me that I would write a book about meetings, I would have struggled to believe it. Because when I left Google early 2018 to launch my own company, and I know you understand this as being founders yourselves, one of the reliefs I felt was no more meetings. I was in a big corporation. As much as I loved Google, I stayed 8 years there. I was suffering through a lot of my meetings. I found them boring. There were a lot of information sharing. I was in a matrix organization, in a global team. And some of my meetings were insufferable simply between us. And when my publisher said they approached me and they wanted me to contribute a book on their business expert series, the Penguin Business Expert series, and I wanted to write a book on leadership of growing companies because I work with founders and of scale-ups, and they said, no, we want you to write a book about a specific problem, a specific leadership problem, and they mentioned a few, and they mentioned meetings, and my first reaction was, but I hate meetings. But then the more I thought about it, that was exactly why I needed to write that book. First, because I understood the issue of many of us, how we have too many meetings, ineffective meetings, boring, frustrating, stressful. But also because throughout my career, whether I was doing sales at Google, coaching sessions, team coaching sessions, my craft, what I was really offering was meetings. I just never called them that. I was calling them a team coaching session or a sales conversation. And the intention was to take all the tools I had learned through my coaching, through my sales, and give them to founders and managers to use in their day-to-day meetings. So that was the intention of the book. The book launched in the UK in the 15th of April. And let's start with at the beginning. Why are we here? And I know I'm preaching to the converted here. Meetings matter. If you didn't believe that, you wouldn't be here. Good meetings inspire action, strengthen connections between our employees and partners, prevent misunderstandings and confusion. How many times you had a misunderstanding with the written word and you had to jump on a call to clarify it? That's what good meetings do. When you cannot afford confusion or misunderstanding, meetings are your best tool. They can help spark new ideas because you get inspired real time by what other people say. And build a healthy culture. In reality, I know you're all building your businesses. If you want a healthy, vibrant culture, one of your most important tools is how you hold your meetings. If you want friendly culture, if you want a safe culture, if you want an honest and transparent culture, this is how you need to run your meetings. On the other side, though, these are why good meetings are important. Bad meetings are bad. They waste money. And we are not really aware how much. I encourage my clients to calculate that, and I will encourage you, if you Google the HBR meeting cost calculator, it's a free tool. And you just write, if you have standing meetings, you just have how much time does the meeting, the weekly meeting take, how many people you have in it, their average salary, and multiply that by the weeks that you have that meeting in a year. And you will see, even your weekly meeting, how much does it cost in terms of the salary of the people and the time they spend. Most of the founders, and we're not talking about big salaries, like if a weekly meeting costs 50K a year, in big corporation, when the salaries are bigger, some weekly meetings can go up to millions a year. So first of all, let's be aware that meetings are expensive and they need to create value to justify for this expense. But it's even more. A meeting can cut a lot the productivity. And I know you will understand this. A lot of you you have tech companies. Creators, whether you're building a strategy, a presentation for the board, whether you're a tech founder and you're writing code, we think in half-day intervals. I'm a writer myself. I won't get started on my manuscript unless I have long time ahead of me, because it takes me an hour to really get started. So if you're a creator or a maker, this idea was first shared by the founder of Y Combinator. You operate in half-day intervals, and even half an hour meeting in the middle of the morning, you can ruin half a day, because you won't get started until that meeting at 10:30 starts, let's say, and you won't get started in your deep work afterwards because it's not enough time until lunch. So you may, if you have random half-hour meetings, lose a lot more productivity than you thought you would. Bad meetings decrease job satisfaction, and there is a lot of research around this. And what's interesting is, as leaders and as founders, we overestimate the quality of our meetings. This is based on research. Because we talk more in our meetings, we think our meetings are more interesting because we are more engaged. So that's something to keep in mind. But also, if the meetings are not good, their job satisfaction will go down, even if they enjoy their job, even if they like their manager. That's what the research shows. So it's really important for job satisfaction. And finally, and I know this is a burnout series, bad meetings lead to burnout, but even good meetings, if you have too many of them, you're more tired. The research shows that if you have too many meetings in a day, you're more tired by the end of the day. But meetings, we need to perform, we need to listen. If you are in back-to-back meetings, you may stay behind in other types of work and feel you need to work in the evenings. So we need to be conscious of using the meetings as the powerful tool that they are to create culture, to create ideas, to inspire action, to strengthen connections, but have quality versus quantity in them. All right. Let me share the most common mistake that leads to ineffective meetings. And I found out about this first time I read an article in Harvard Business Review. It was called "Why Groups Struggle to Solve Problems Together." And the article was arguing that individually we solve problems and we jump from one stage of the problem solving to another. Let me give you an example. You're thinking, what should I have for dinner? That's a problem. You're thinking individually. An idea comes up. You say, let me order pasta. And then you say, no, I need something with more vegetables. You go back, you redefine the problem. I need something with more vegetables. More ideas come in. Let's say you order a curry. So that's the process as an individual that works great. But bring a group together that are jumping through the stages of defining the problem, developing solutions, deciding and doing, back and forth. Everyone is in a different stage, and then you have chaos. And I read this and I was really inspired because it was explaining so much of the chaos I was seeing when I was observing team meetings as a coach. I usually observe a team meeting before I do a team coaching session just to see the dynamics. And it explained so much of the chaos. I remember I was seeing a meeting and the team was discussing how to invite clients in a webinar, like a simple issue. It was one of the many items in the agenda. And they totally got stuck on this. The leader was trying to make a decision. He was saying, let's vote solution, system A or system B, which system to use to invite the clients. You had one participant keep finding new solutions. How about system C? Or how about we do D? Another participant was saying, I don't understand why we're discussing this. Why don't we do what we've always done? So what was happening in that situation? That every one of the participants was in a different stage of the problem-solving process. The leader was trying to make decisions. One participant was trying to create solutions. Another participant did not see the problem. So he was not understanding why we were having the discussion in the first place. So what's the mistake? Not aligning the participants to work towards the same outcome at the same time. So how can you do that? Let me make it simple. And that's why I created the 4D meeting framework. So to solve any problem, you need A, to define the problem or the goal, develop ideas, decide, and do what you decided. So I would invite you to go to your calendars and categorize your meetings. Which one of these outcomes are you pursuing in your meetings? And if you're pursuing more than 1D, I would invite you to do it in specific sections. And this is so useful. For example, most of my team coaching sessions are defined. We're trying to identify what are the issues with the team or what the common vision of the team is, define problems and goals. When we're developing ideas, it's really crucial you actually signpost this. This is a develop ideas. You can call it ideation. I wouldn't call it brainstorming because a lot of the traditional brainstorming techniques don't work. But you need to protect it from people that want to judge the solutions or they want to make a decision. You need to signpost it because it will be more effective. You don't want to have divergent thinking and convergent thinking at the same time. First, develop the ideas and then decide. Separate those steps. And the same, you can make a decision, you can have a different meeting for the implementation. And the do meetings are meetings to where the desired outcome is action. It can be inspire action meetings. I would consider the meeting we're having today a do meeting. My intention here is to inspire you to do a lot, to implement a lot of these tools. This is the 4D meeting framework. Any questions around this before I move on to the next item on the agenda? A benefit of this framework, feel free to put in the chat, is that if you are having meetings to pursue 4D outcomes, you are leveraging the brain power of all your participants. As you will see here, there's not a D around information sharing. I would actually say most of the information sharing, unless it's an emotional, unless as a founder you need to announce good news or bad news to the company, you can do this asynchronously. You can send an email, you can send a selfie video, you can send an audio recording. So a lot of the do meetings, for example, with my assistant, we have a weekly to-do meeting. We're going through our Trello board, and we look at the project, and our objective is implementation, how we move the projects along. That's a do meeting, for example. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will move on. What's the #1 priority to focus on for successful meetings? And I first realized this. I was back in my corporate career in sales, and I was in a new job. I got a new account, and I met the client, and they shared a complaint with one team from the same company as I was, that I was also working with them. So I go to the manager of the team and I share the complaint of my client, and he says, why don't you come to share the complaint in the team meeting we have? And I thought, oh, must be so insightful. He wants the whole team to hear it from me. So I go to the meeting, as naive as I was, and I share the complaint my client had. And the director, the manager's manager of that team, shouted at me, and he said, your client is smoking weed. And I froze. And I didn't even freeze in that meeting only. I was freezing every time in every meeting I was with that director. Why did that happen? Why does this happen? Because a lot of us, our subconscious, our body, we interpret what something is superior, like a critical remark, whether it comes from a person of authority or a peer, or even from your team. If someone from your team challenges your authority, you can interpret this as a threat, an important threat, and you go into survival mode. You go into freeze or flight or fight, flight, freeze response. And that means you cannot think productively. And Google studied 180 teams for years, and they were trying to identify the code. What makes a team successful? And 180 teams, they were both successful and unsuccessful in that group, and they just couldn't figure it out. Individual performance of the people in the team did not matter. Whether they were located in the same office did not matter. Whether they were using consensus decision-making did not matter. They just couldn't figure it out. It was only when they stumbled on the research of on psychological safety that they actually figured it out. It was psychological safety more than any other attribute that separated successful teams from unsuccessful. That's why I would say this is your first priority as a founder. And also as founders, we underestimate how scary we are. I know we're lovely people and we want to be approachable and friendly, but it just takes a day that we are a little bit more tired and we are a little bit more impatient in the meeting, and people will think it's not safe to speak up around us. And I work on this with many of my clients, many of my teams, and I even had this feedback given to me. I was in a course, and in the end of the meeting, someone in the team said, actually, she stopped contributing because she felt intimidated by the way I was carrying myself in that group. So I've been in both sides of the spectrum, being the person that doesn't feel psychologically safe, and also being the person in that course that contributes to someone else not feeling psychologically safe. So I wanted to share with you 4 things you can do to increase the psychological safety in your teams. You ready? Okay. Let's start. Verbally reward people for speaking up. And this is even more important when they share the difficult stuff. When they disagree with you. I know your instinct is, oh my goodness, you're slowing down decision-making, but actually how you react to someone disagreeing with you, it will be important on how safe the other people will feel in the team to disagree with you. So you just say, thank you for sharing this different perspective. Who else shared this perspective? Or reward people for sharing a mistake if you want them to share the mistakes rather than hide them under the carpet. Reward even people for sharing unbaked ideas. If you want to foster innovation, people need to feel safe to share even unbaked ideas, crazy ideas. So when people share the difficult stuff, as the founder, reward them. Second, model honesty and vulnerability. Pixar does this very well. In the onboarding of new employees, the executives go and share all the mistakes the company has made. And they send the message that even if the company, we know how successful Pixar is, even if the company is hugely successful, everybody makes mistakes and people are encouraged to challenge their superiors. So in the beginning of the meeting, you can share one of your mistakes or share something personal, model honesty and vulnerability if that's the environment you want to foster. Number 3, create the structure for speaking out. If your meetings are packed with presentations and status updates, and I was coaching a team last week, I think that they even have a huge meeting, like a 2.5 every week, but they never had time really to solve problems and share and bring up the difficult stuff, and some issues were festering. And they were saying, we don't have time in the team meeting to actually solve these infected issues that are festering, because they felt they needed time. So if you want people to discuss, to ideate, to share problems, to share ideas, leave time for Q&A, for discussion. Don't pack your agendas in your meetings. And finally, I invite you to measure your psychological safety. And you could do that if you're using, if you have virtual meetings, just launch a poll. I think both Zoom and Microsoft Teams, you have the poll capacity. What's the definition, actually? I never shared with you the definition of psychological safety. Psychological safety is the ability to take an interpersonal risk in the group. That's why I was talking about sharing mistakes, sharing unbaked ideas, sharing opposing views. That's an interpersonal risk, and how able you are to take that interpersonal risk in the group, the more psychologically safe you are. So what I do with my teams when I'm coaching, and I encourage you to do it, we measure the current psychological safety. It could be with a poll. If we're in the same room, I write them from 1 to 10, rate how psychological safety you feel in the group from 1 to 10, and we do it on a post-it notes, and then we calculate the average. That awareness is enough to boost the psychological safety. I've done this with teams again and again. We do the awareness exercise, and after you do the average, and it could be, last time I did it, it was a 7.3, then you can go around the table and share what is one experience in this meeting, in this team, that made you feel safer, and one experience that made you feel less safe. Share this, and that's so powerful. Then I met that team 6 months later, and we rated again. We asked them to measure the psychological safety again, and it had increased from 7.3 to 8.3. And because we created an awareness, does it exist, psychological safety, and what are the behaviors that people contribute? And by the way, here's things you can do, but psychological safety belongs to everyone in the group. It could be that you have a very critical employee that actually damages the psychological safety. Everyone needs to contribute. Safety belongs in the group. It doesn't belong with one individual only. And that's on psychological safety. Feel free to put any questions in the chat. I hope this are practical tips you can take away and increase the psychological safety in your teams, because it's the #1 attribute that will make your team high performing. Finally, what are the 4 questions to answer at the beginning of your meeting? And we know first impressions matter. We know the beginning is important, but most of us are tempted to skip any setting up in the beginning and jump right into the agenda, right into the work. And there was one experiment by Robert Cialdini. He wrote the book Influence. He got 2 groups of MBAs to negotiate a deal. And the first group, he told them, time is money, go down to business, start negotiating immediately. And the second group, he told them, actually, try to connect with each other first, find something you have in common, and then negotiate a deal. What group do you think performed better? So the group that went down to business, didn't have any introductions, they reached the deal 55% of the time. The group that spent some time connecting in the beginning and finding something they had in common reached the deal 90% of the time. And the value of the deal was 18% higher. So as much as you're tempted to go down to business, start working on the agenda, skip any introductions, don't, because that will save you tons of time later. So what are the questions that people have either consciously or subconsciously in their minds when they come to your meeting? First, why am I here? And why should I care? Then, do I belong here? Am I a valued member of this group? How are we going to do this? What do I need to know before we get started? So how do you start your meetings to answer all these questions? And for this also, I like creating models. That's another model from the book that start with the same letter, because I think it's easier to remember. First, center your participants around the purpose of the meeting. We're here today. The reason we're here today is this. And when we walk away, we walk away with X. Connect. It's a great practice to have everyone's voice in the room in the first 3 minutes. Connect, it could be sharing something. It could be sharing something personal, vulnerable, positive. Something I recommend is maybe you can say what was the highlight of the week and the low light of the week or the month, depending how often you meet. Spend some time connecting on a human level. Third, contract. Contract could be as simple as this is the agenda, or contract is how we're going to do this. It could be how you're going to use the chat, how you're going to use the breakout rooms, how are interruptions encouraged or discouraged? Can people, if it's in the person meeting, can they be on the screens? And even sometimes when we do team contracting, how you want to be with each other. Do you want to be honest, transparent? All of the contracting, and it depends. You don't, sometimes when I work with teams, we do a team agreement and team contracting, and we can revisit it in subsequent meetings. And finally, consume. And that's where if you have some content, some information that they need to consume before the meeting. So on Twitter, the way they start the meetings, they have a Google document, and everybody silently goes and reads the Google documents and add comments. That's how they do it on Twitter. On Amazon, they have the memo. It's a 5-page memo. In the beginning of the meetings, they have 15 minutes of silence. They read the memo. They consume the content. And there are some benefits of that, right? People don't hide away from slides and bullet points. They need to really write deep thoughts on a memo, but also everyone can read it on their own pace. If you send the information in advance, that's an option, but sometimes people will not read it, right? That's why Amazon makes them read it in the beginning, because they assume nobody will read it in advance. What I'd say is don't do both. Don't send it in advance and also spend 15 minutes reading it or presenting it in the meeting, because you're wasting people's time. Like the people that read it in advance will not read it again because they will feel their time is wasted. So these are the 4 steps. You don't have to do all 4 of them in every meeting, but go through those in your mind and think what's important. Even as I was going through those slides and I saw that question, why am I here and why should I care? This morning, I went and I added the slides, why meeting matter? Because I was thinking, oh, actually, I wasn't answering the question, why should you care about meetings? And that helped me go and add that slide to really establish why meetings are important. So here's the summary. The number 1 mistake, not aligning the participants to work towards the same outcome at the same time. Remember the 4D framework: define, develop, decide, and do. Number 1 priority, foster psychological safety. And the 4 steps to start your meeting with impact: center around the purpose, connect on a personal level, contract how you're going to do this, and consume, if it's relevant, any content. And with that, I'd like to open it to questions. I know Lindy has some questions from the participants. Lindy, you're on mute.
Classic, right? Okay, I thought I was a bit more slick than that, but obviously not. But that was a really great presentation, Caterina. And I think sometimes as well, it's so, sometimes it seems really obvious, but there is a lot of thought behind it to get a successful meeting. So just reading through the questions that have been submitted in advance, and participants as well, if you'd like to obviously put your questions through as well, we can go through them at the end. So Caterina, what's good practice rhythm for teams, comms and updates when you're early stage and still building and there's not key leader roles in place?
Sure. So I don't think there's a side fits all. What I would say is consider that your updates don't necessarily need to be real time. What I've seen a lot of startups doing, even the stand-up, instead of having the stand-up, they have an app, and every day everyone says what they're working on, the key challenges, etc. Because some people love the stand-up, some people don't like to be at 9:05. I know my husband is in a startup, 9:05 every day, he needs to be for the daily stand-up, and that can be quite restricting. So what I would say is, obviously the Agile says you need to communicate daily and weekly. There are all the ceremonies. What I would invite you to consider is, do I have to do all these updates on a meeting? Which one of those can I do asynchronously? When I was at Google, our president would do selfie videos. And I always suggest this because I love them. He would be in an important client meeting, and after the meeting, he will do selfie video, sharing his thoughts about this important client or where the business was going, and share the videos. And I found this update great because I had an insight on the president's thought, and I'm sure the team of the founder will want to have an insight in your brain. It's so quick to do, but I would also consume the content when I could, after I finished my work, rather than being interrupted, rather than doing this all hands. I will say, if you do all hands, and I would encourage you to do them, it's not so much about updates, unless they're emotional updates, right? It's more to inspire action, to build culture. Think of them as a production. You want people to feel more connected to the business, more connected to your mission. In all hands, it's a do meeting. What do you want them to do after this? It's not about communication so much. You can send a memo for that. It's more around inspiration. I hope that clarifies a little bit. The rhythm can be different in all the businesses. What I would say is be deliberate on what's the purpose of your communications.
No, great answer. And another one here, there's been a lot of research done about methods regarding successful meetings, send out agendas, maybe do them walking or standing up, but they're rarely implemented. Why do you think this is?
I would say inertia, and because sending agendas needs preparation. And it's true, like the more you prepare for a meeting, the better the quality. That's proven by research. So a lot of times it's busyness. A lot of times we have meetings in the calendar and we don't even know why we're there, what the purpose is. In terms of standing and walking, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think walking is great if you have a one-to-one, two people, and especially we are all in the UK, we lack vitamin D. I would encourage people to have it voice only. Now your virtual meetings, voice only, don't have the camera. There's actually some research that say if you actually don't have eye contact, you can share more. We know walking boosts creativity. So I would encourage all of us to consider having our one-to-ones walking phone calls. And if it's in-person walking, again, it works. We know Steve Jobs was doing almost all his meetings walking, but it needs to be 2, maximum 3. It needs to be a defined meeting. Maybe like you not need to take so many notes, right? Let's be practical here. In terms of standing, there are benefits on standing, but there also, you can't have a standing meeting for more than 15 minutes. Let's be clear. We cannot have a standing meeting. We know a lot of people, it's not very egalitarian. A lot of people will struggle physically standing for longer, and standing can be good for short meetings. I would say what I like to do is mixing it up. If we are in the room, I like to design a meeting where people will maybe send them in couples to walk and discuss something, have them standing around a whiteboard and maybe do some brainstorming there, some sitting down, mix it up and use all this element to your advantage.
Okay, great. And also, what are your thoughts on open discussion, huddle slots with no fixed agenda? Are there other ways to beat remote working isolation?
Yes, so I like that question, because what I see is to have successful meetings, you need to have strong relationships. To have strong relationships, you don't need to have meetings. And why I say that, there was some research done on call centers by the company Humanize and they realized that team cohesion, feeling close to your colleagues, that's what team cohesion is, was crucial, was many times more important on the performance in the call centers than individual performance or anything else. How they felt connected to their colleagues was what mattered the most. And they looked at the experiments. How did they create this team cohesion? And it wasn't meetings that created the team cohesion. What was it? Was lunch breaks that were at the same time. Mm-hmm. And what I get out of this experiment is that if team cohesion, if managing the disconnect that comes from remote work is your objective, rather than have meetings, and I had clients that they were having a status meeting, everyone was bored, and what they really wanted to do was to build team cohesion. A status meeting is not your way to build team cohesion. Have unstructured social time. That's why I like the non-agenda. Name it as social time. The challenge with remote that's very easy to do, right? At Google, we had TGI Friday, thank God it's Friday. In Twitter, they had Tea Thursdays. When you're in the office, it's very easy to do this social time. How do you do it remotely? And I like, you can have this Slack channels that are more informal and people can talk about other things. What I would invite you to do is use a different medium. If you're using Zoom for your meetings, use a different platform for your social time. If you have like Friday social time or whatever. I know a friend at Google, they said for social time, they were using House Party just to help people switch off, or maybe ask for a different dress code. Because what's really hard is if you're going for your meetings in the screen, Zoom call, wearing this, it's hard to differentiate what's a meeting. Meeting is bringing a group of people together to achieve a common purpose, and what's social time, where the objective is to build this team cohesion, deepen those relationships.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. I think as well, that was like lockdown over Christmas. I think a lot of companies probably struggled there, how to have their like a celebration for the team, but not doing it via Zoom. So it was like business as usual. So no, I completely agree with you there, Caterina. I mean, another one coming in, I work in a small team. How do I extract myself from unnecessary meetings without coming across like I don't care?
I actually added a slide on the appendix. I took that in the book. I tried as often as possible. Let me share this to share people what they can actually say in scripts. Let me share that because I actually give scripts of things you could say. So how can you say no? I'm not the best person to attend this meeting. Someone else will have more relevant input if this other person exists. I'm working on another project at the moment. Could you please brief me about the outcome of the meeting afterwards or include me in the follow-up email? What type of input do you need from me? Could I give it to you before the meeting? I see that the meeting has no agenda or clear objective. Is this meeting needed? And I see that only a small part of the meeting is relevant to me. Can I join for only that part of the meeting? I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we'll definitely, and we can share this afterwards as well. And also as well, I can see that there's some questions coming in from the Q&A, and the final one that's been submitting in advance is, are people their own worst enemy when it comes to meetings? When should they say no?
So are people their own worst enemies? When should they say no? So I created a table of good reasons to have a meeting and bad reasons to have a meeting. The good reasons are the 4D. I think that's easy. We covered. We can talk a little bit here around why do we have so many meetings? One is a lot of these founders that are the listeners of this webinar. We honestly believe that more meetings will lead to better collaboration. And that's not always the case. The research actually shows quite the opposite. Most of the meetings are done in silos. They don't necessarily lead to better collaboration. Also, as a leader, meetings are convenient for the leaders. And that's something important to recognize as founders. Because rather than you spending an hour writing an email, you can have a half-an-hour meeting, share your update, you're done, you saved half an hour. But if you have an 8-people team, you absorbed 8 half-an-hours from other people. So it's convenient for the leader. It's not convenient for the organization as a whole. For the organization as a whole, writing that email. And then there's some psychological need that the leaders may have, that they only feel like a leader of the team when they have a meeting. Otherwise, so I also go deeper with clients. What is the psychological need that I need? People are attached to their team meetings because that's when they feel leader of the team. And I say, yes, I understand this is a valid human need. Let's have better quality meetings rather than having many meetings to satisfy this. So I wanted to share this because I think it's especially relevant for the founders. So we should say no, as I said, when it's simply information sharing, use asynchronously. When it's for the convenience of the leader and it's not the convenience of the organization, don't do it. When it's to build team cohesion, don't do meetings, do social experiences. when it is for, and I have even more reasons we shouldn't have meetings, or best practice sharing. That's a waste of time most of the time. You can have other ways to share the best practice. So these are, I would say, the top of mind examples when you should say no to a meeting.
Yeah, no, that's very, very thorough. Thank you, Caterina. And moving on to the questions that have been submitting through now. What is the best practice around meeting spaces? How much difference do they make? How should startups think about how much to invest in their own meeting spaces or meeting spaces for hire?
Spaces are important. If you are to invest in your own meeting spaces, I would say one suggestion I would have is use a separate meeting room for the develop ideas meeting. When you want people to go out of the box, create a separate place for them. So when they go in there, they know they can be funky, they can share. That's a good association you can build. If you have an office and you want to build a separate space, call it brainstorming, I don't mind. Have an ideation meeting. Obviously, using plants matters, and it's been proven to help even oxygenate, and we have better ideas. Having natural light. That said, when I do team coaching, and team coaching is expensive mostly because I take a whole executive team for a day, or usually like 2.5 days. It's a long meeting, right? And it's expensive because it's the time of the executive plus the investment. I always strongly encourage you do it outside of the office. So for your strategic meetings, for your offsite, if you're doing team coaching sessions, whatever it is, I would say hire something outside, because there's something my clients always tell me, there's something, this meeting is so effective because we're not in the distraction mode, we're not in the normal office, we are really thinking outside of the box because we are outside of our normal box. So make it pleasant, make it natural light, use plants, and work on the subconscious side affiliations, that this is a place for creativity, this is a place for strategic thinking, for big picture thinking.
Okay, no, that's great. Okay. Also as well, how do you balance meeting focus and also participant psychology? For example, if we are trying to converge on action, but participants want to continue to diverge and explore thoughts and ideas?
I think I love this question because it's exactly why we separate the develop ideas and the decide and the do. In the develop, you want diversity of thought. In the decide, you want actually productive conflict. If you want, I know you're building your businesses, if you want to make the best decisions, even if you are the decision maker, but you're consulting the team, you want to ignite productive conflict. That said, once the decision is made, you're on the do stage and you're discussing about the implementation, that's when you want alignment. And I think separating those stages, and maybe you can dedicate time. You will say, we will ideate solutions for 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to the decide stage. On the decide stage, if you want to make it a quick, there are 3 ways you can make decisions, right? There's the consensus. It's the most time consuming and expensive when everyone needs to agree. There is the majority rule that can be quick. This is, let's take a vote. And it's the consultative. Either you as the founder, you own the decision, or you give the decision to someone in the team. And you can say, we will deliberate on this for 15 minutes or an hour, whatever it is. And then Maria will make the decision, or then I will make the decision. So you can actually time post this so that a decision will be made. And once the decision is made, you ask people to commit to it. That's what Jeff Bezos says, disagree and commit. Even if they didn't agree with the decision, you ask them to commit to the decision rather than go and talk bad about the decision to their teams, so that you can actually work on the implementation of the decision as a team and align towards common action.
Okay, no, that's great. And it is 10 to 2, so we still have time. So there is one more question, but please submit more in for Caterina while she's here. So Caterina, question here, what do great project management meetings look like? I think ours are very dry, like daily stand-up.
Okay. So daily stand-up project management. That's a good question. I would say if you follow the 4 C's to start the meeting, and that I wouldn't do that in a daily stand-up, I would do it a weekly project management meeting. First of all, like if you don't want it to be dry, connect at the personal level, see the bigger picture, things like that. How you start the meeting will make it less dry, more personal, more inspirational. I'm thinking about my weekly, as I said, project management meetings. And project management meetings can be really dry because you don't want to encourage a lot of conflict. That's true, because you really want to move the project along. That said, I think from the ceremonies, even in the project management, you can have small bursts of develop ideas. And I can talk a little bit about how you can boost the creativity for your group and develop ideas. That will help it make it more interesting, add some creativity even in the project management. And I think something that a lot of us avoid, and it's part of the agile, but a lot of people avoid it, is the retrospective. And we avoid it because psychologically we don't want to talk about the past, we want to move ahead. But it's so important actually taking the time of what did we do, how we could improve, what could have done better. And that said, if it's a very process-oriented meeting, we can keep it short and sweet as well. It doesn't have to be hugely entertainment. As long as it's effective, as long as people feel it was time good spent. A lot of the stand-ups I know, they're boring. The problem is they're not project management. They are information and status updates. There's not problems being solved. If it's a project management meeting, you need to solve problem in real time. Otherwise, you shouldn't be real time.
Yeah. No, very interesting, Caterina. One here, thanks for the session. I've just ordered your book. Are there any articles, books, podcasts that really stand out for you on getting meetings right for further information?
Articles, books, podcasts. So my book is heavily researched. So I have to say, there's a lot of books, a lot of articles. What did stand out for me? The article I shared that explains the origins of my 4D meeting framework, it's in Harvard Business School, I think it's why groups struggle to solve meetings together, from Alpit and Pali. I can share the link. I love that article because it inspired the 4D meeting framework, and half my book is around how to do each one of the 4Ds successfully. In terms of other books, if you want to go deeper on psychological safety, Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization. If you want to go deeper on how to have productive conflict, I recently read a book, it's called The Good Fight. So each one of those, a lot of people say, oh, you chose such a niche topic, meetings. It's not a niche topic. It's everything. And as you saw, there's so much in being a leader in this meeting. So I would say, these are the top of mind resources, I would say, to go deeper in some of the things we covered today.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And do you have any thoughts on how to encourage members of the meeting to participate without putting individuals on the spot?
Yes. So if you have a remote meeting, I think technology has made this so much easier. Like we did today, it's a hard format. I don't even see you in this webinar format, but I asked, can you ask a question and write in the chat? So I invited some participation. Use the chat room is one. Breakout rooms. I love breakout rooms. They work so well for introverts. They work so well for creating that banter that exists in in-person meetings. So even if an in-person meeting, I will say break out a bigger team in smaller teams. You can even have them back and ask each other, shares each other opinion, rather than me sharing the opinion after the breakout, share the opinion of my couple. That's one of the ways. Do a poll. I find the bar to participation is so much lower in virtual meetings. And I love, when I'm team coaching, doing the round robin, but not the round robin like in the stand-up that you share an update. I do a round robin, sharing opinions, sharing the difficult stuff, like what do you want to get out of the discussion, or what do you want to hear today? What do you want to say today? Or choose some questions and actually do a round robin. And that way you're not calling people individually, but everyone gets an opportunity to speak up.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Another question. My instinct tells me that hybrid meetings are going to be hard to make work. My preference is an all in-person meeting or an all virtual. What is your opinion?
I agree. And I know some companies, Trello, for example, even before the pandemic, if someone was remote, they would ask everyone to join from the laptops, even if they were in the office, to have a level playing field. And when I'm coaching teams, I'm doing the same. I coached team last week. Some of them were in the office, but because some of them were remote, I asked everyone to be remote, because then we could I used a tool like Mural or Miro. We were playing with virtual Post-its. We were all on our laptops, right? If you are to have hybrid meetings, if you cannot avoid it, you need to be very conscious how non-inclusive they are for the person that's remote. If everyone is in the room and it's only a couple of people remote, it's so harder for them to participate. So as a leader, I would say be conscious of that and invite them to participate and give them the stage first. Be very conscious, but my preference is also either all in person or all remote.
Okay, brilliant. No, Caterina, there's no more questions coming through at the moment. We have 5 minutes. I was going to say, you said a bit earlier about you could give some examples of boosting creativity. I mean, maybe could you give a quick overview of your top tips, maybe?
I will. I just wanted to do the giveaway before I forget. And I know someone said they already ordered the book, and thank you very much, but you can still, I want to give you a form. I'm happy for the people that stay until the end to reward them. If any of you would like the book, I'm happy to send it over. So let me share that link now. And I will share some tips. Let me share it in the chat for creative meetings. Okay. So for creative meetings, I would say first, ask people to define the problem correctly. How might we do something? I love the how might we structure. How might we increase our revenue? How might we make it specific? Invite people to write their ideas individually first and then share them. That's the easiest and more effective tip I can give you. And so many people don't do this because there's so much, like, you avoid the social anxiety. People write it first. You avoid them blocking each other because they're listening to ideas rather than producing ideas. That's the first one I would say. Do this hybrid of individual brainstorming and sharing. The second I would say is, if you have a group that's not very safe, you can actually frame the question as a negative. How might you reduce our revenue, for example, and get some creative juices flowing? You can do some guided ideation. When I facilitate ideations, I would say, how would we solve this if we were Apple? How would we solve it if we were Basecamp? How would we solve it if we were Cirque du Soleil? How would we solve it if we were the military and we needed military precision? So you can, when people are writing, you can give some stimuli to help them think things differently. And if you're really stuck, I will say brainstorm for questions. If you can't really find a solution, go back to redefine the problem. And usually I give 4 minutes to people, brainstorm questions around the issue. And then we usually get unlocked. Some great questions will come up and will help us see the problem in a different angle. Someone says, I do not see the link from Caterina. Do you see it?
Oh, it's with bear with me, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. That should hopefully have done that. Yeah, no, those are really good examples. And Caterina, I'm aware we've got 2 minutes, so give people time to click the link. I mean, what would be your one big takeaway from today's session if you were a founder? Like your big tip?
My big tip is measure the success of your meetings with how much of the time you leverage the brain power of all your participants.
Yeah,
that will be my big takeaway. And also I love to close this session saying that bad meetings make us feel lonely and powerless, but good meetings fill us with a sense of strength and belonging. And there's nothing more powerful, like only a team of committed citizens can change the world. And I know you're a founder because you want to make a difference, you want to have an impact, and you brought a team together. So I would say bring this team together real time when there's a purpose for it. Real time is bringing them together in meetings. And that's how you change the world. Help them define goals, develop ideas, make decisions, and do things to change the world.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's quite empowering, Caterina. It's now, I just want to wrap up, everyone, and just say thank you so much for coming. Thank you as well. Massive thanks to Caterina for hosting this session. For participants on the call, I'll be sharing a recording in the community, and also high-level notes as well. So thank you very much for joining. We hope that you've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.